Hello and welcome back. So now we want to add the Axios service, okay, because we are going to be using Axios for making the requests, okay, from API gateway to clients and then from API gateway to our microservices, okay. So in our gateway service source, inside the services folder, I'll create a new file. I'll call this axios.ts, okay. So this will just be a class, and then what we want to do is this is where we are going to append the gateway JWT token, and then also we are going to set the headers that we want our request to have, okay. So this is where we are going to implement that, and to do that, let's see, to make sure we already have Axios installed. Okay, so we already have Axios installed. Okay, so let me import Axios from Axios. Okay, and then also import JWT sign. We need the sign from JSON web token, the sign method, and then we also need our config or import config from gateway config. Okay, now let's create the class. So export. Probably here I am not going to create an instance here. Instead, I will create an instance of the class where we need it, because the reason is because the class, the constructor, will require some properties. Okay, now if we go back to this and some other classes that we've created, the reason why it was easier for us to create an instance inside the same class and export is because this class constructor does not require any property. Okay, does not require any param. So this is defining this way is the same as saying constructor. Okay, without defining the constructor without any property, an empty constructor. Okay, so this is the same because we don't really require any additional property. That is why we are exporting it inside the class. The same goes with the other classes we've created. But now, with respect to the Axios class we want to create, we are not going to export an instance. We are going to export the whole class, because when we create an instance of this class, we would need to pass in some properties. Okay, so class, I'll call this Axios Service. Okay, and I need a public property called Axios, so we can access. I'm setting this to public because I want us to be able to access this from outside of this class. And to set the type, I'll get the type using return type, and then type of Axios dot create. Okay, so we are getting our type from the Axios dot create, whatever is set as the type for this Axios dot create method. In TypeScript, if you want to get a type of a particular property that will be set to another property, you can do it this way. Okay, so the create method, whatever type is set on the create method, that is what is going to be the type for this particular property. Okay, now you can see it's Axios instance. Now let us create our constructor. Now this constructor will take in two properties. Okay, the first property is the base URL. Okay, so this is going to be base URL. It's going to be of type string, because we are going to create multiple services, authentication service, user service. So we are going to pass in the base URL of each service anytime we create an instance of this Axios service. And then the second is going to be the service name, and it's going to be of type string. Now this service name, that is what we are going to add to our JWT token. Let's go back to our shared. Okay, as you can see here, we have this tokens list, and all these properties here, they represent the name of the service. Now I already explained earlier that you can decide to use something different. Maybe you can use some alphanumeric keys. You can use some kind of keys instead of using this plain text. Okay. So for us here, for simplicity's sake, the service name will be represented with this text you have right here. So we are going to use JWT token to sign, and then once we get to this part, we are going to check if it contains this gateway property, and then if the gateway property contains an ID which is contained in these tokens. Okay, so here I'm going to set this dot Axios. Before I set that, let me create a method. Now let's create the method that will set up Axios. So Axios creates instance. Okay, this will take base URL of type string. This will take service name, but the service name is going to be optional. Okay, and then what is going to be the return type? This is going to be the return type. Okay, so this method is going to return a type of Axios instance. Okay, so if we check the type here, Axios instance, that is what we are going to return here. Now we need to set this gateway token. Okay, I already explained this multiple times. This is required if the request is going to be coming from the API gateway. So in our microservices that connects to the API gateway via the request response HTTP, then we are going to check if it contains this gateway token property. Okay, so I'll say let gateway token equals to an empty string. Let me make sure that I have the same name. Okay, gateway token, and then I'll say if we have a service name, because service name right here is optional. So if service name exists, then I want to sign this gateway token. I'll say gateway token equal to sign from JWT right here, and then I'm going to pass in the property, and the property we want to pass is an object that will contain an ID. Okay, so I'll say ID, set it to service name, and then what do we want to sign it with? We sign it with our gateway token config.gateway token right here. Okay, so this is just what we need to do right here in order for us to sign the token. So if a request is going to the authentication service, then whatever the service name we use, that we are going to set it to this ID property and then sign it, add it to the request. So now let's add it to the request. Const instance, yeah, this will definitely be of type this, and then it's going to be equal to Axios dot create. First let me return instance. Okay, now Axios dot create, we pass in an object, then base URL will be equal to base URL, and then we set our headers. So this is where we set our headers. We just want some simple headers, okay, not complicated. We send content type. Okay, it's going to be application/JSON. So if you want to set special headers, this is how you need to do it. Okay, and then accept application/JSON, and then lastly we need to set this gateway token, because in our library, the verify gateway request, we are checking if this gateway token exists inside our headers. Okay, so here we are going to set gateway token to be equal to this gateway token, but we need to use the shorthand. Okay, so they're still the same. Okay, so I will just remove this, or let me call this request gateway token. Okay, so it's much clearer. Okay, so and then after the headers, we want to set with credentials, we set it to true. This is very important so that our token will be added to our request. Remember, we are saving it in the cookie session, so we need to set with credentials to true. Now that we have this Axios create instance, we can use it here. It's going to be this.axios equal to this dot Axios create instance, and then we pass the base URL and then the service name. Okay, so this is what we need to do right here. Now, if we decide to use this function, let's say we have a service where we want to use this class. What we need to do is we are going to say const, let's say Axios test equal to new Axios, but now it requires a base URL and a service name. So the base URL could be something like, let's say, maybe one of the auth services. Let me use config.auth base URL /API /v1/auth, and then we add the service name. Now this is what whatever value you put right here, that is what the verify method from the gateway middleware will check for. Okay, so if, for example, you set this to auths and then you make the request, and then this verify gateway request checks, okay, auth does not exist in this list, it's going to throw an error. It's going to reject the request. Okay, so the request will be rejected. We'll just assume, okay, the request is not coming from the API gateway. Okay, but if you set it to auth right here, and then it checks, okay, we verify the token, and it has this ID payload, and it checks, okay, it exists inside this tokens list, then we assume the request is coming from the API gateway. It will allow the request to proceed. Okay, so this is what I mean by allowing requests to come via only the API gateway and not from outside. So if we try to access the auth service from outside or from any other part of the application that is not the API gateway, it's always going to reject the request. So I will remove this, and yeah, we have what we need. Once we start adding the different services, we are going to use this Axios instance that we have created.